He had chosen isolation, burying himself in the mountains, away from the memories of war, until a knock on his door shattered everything. "This is your daughter," a voice said, dragging him back into a world he thought he'd left behind. Snow fell in relentless sheets across the mountain highway. Ezra Blackwood gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the weathered skin. Twice a year, only twice, he allowed himself this necessary evil of venturing into town. The radio crackled with static fragments about missing hikers lost in the very wilderness he called home. His satellite phone, dormant for months, suddenly blared to life. The number displayed was unknown. Ezra let it fade to silence. Whoever it was, they weren't part of his world anymore. Only his former commanding officer had this number, and they hadn't spoken in years. The snow was getting worse. He needed to focus on the treacherous mountain road that led to his sanctuary. Ezra's truck lurched over the unpaved Forest Service road, chains biting into the accumulated snow. He passed the weathered, no trespassing signs he'd strategically placed at misleading intervals. The false trails he'd created over the years would ensure no casual hiker would stumble upon his cabin. His home wasn't on any map. That's exactly how he wanted it. As the cabin came into view, sturdy logs darkened by years of mountain weather, smoke curling from the chimney thanks to the timer-controlled stove he'd engineered, something like peace settled over him. The solar panels on the south-facing slope were nearly buried in snow. He'd need to clear them tomorrow. Ezra unloaded his supplies methodically. Rice, beans, coffee, ammunition, medical supplies, and the few luxuries he permitted himself: books, pencils for sketching, and a bottle of decent whiskey. 6 months' worth of necessities carefully inventoried. The general store owner in town had stopped trying to make conversation years ago, just nodded and packed Ezra's standard order. But today, she'd broken their unspoken agreement. "Seems like more folks gone missing up in your neck of the woods," she'd said, sliding his change across the counter. "2 hikers last month, then that woman and her kid 3 days ago. You see anything unusual up there, Mr. Blackwood?" He'd shaken his head, eyes down. "I mind my business." "Well, if you spot anything, the ranger station got a search going. Mother and daughter, they think. The car was found abandoned about 20 miles from your turnoff." The memory of her words needled him as he stacked canned goods on shelves. He didn't need complications. Other people's problems weren't his concern anymore. He'd learned that lesson in blood. That night, as wind howled around the cabin eaves, Ezra dreamed of desert heat and exploding earth. The faces of his unit swam before him. Martinez with his photos of twin baby girls he'd never meet. Heller singing off key country songs during midnight watch. Abramson, the youngest, always asking medical questions because he wanted to be a doctor someday. All of them looked to Ezra, their medic, as they bled out into the sand. His hands, useless. His supplies, insufficient. His training, inadequate for the ambush that took them all. Ezra woke up gasping, sheets damp with sweat despite the cabin's chill. The bedside clock read 3:17 a.m. He wouldn't sleep again tonight. He never did after the dream. He moved through his morning ritual by lamplight. Physical training, push-ups, pull-ups on the beam across the main room, squats with his rucksack weighted with stones. Then water is heated on the wood stove for instant coffee and oatmeal. Ezra spent the morning clearing snow, checking his snare lines and splitting more firewood. Physical labor was its own meditation. His breath plumed in the frigid air as he worked, his body moving with the efficiency of a man who had stripped life down to its essentials. The ravens arrived at noon, as they always did. 3 of them, glossy black against the snow. Ezra scattered a handful of corn and dried berries on the porch railing. He didn't name them. That would be too much like having pets, having attachments, but he recognized their individual patterns, the way the largest one always stood guard while the others ate. "At least you don't ask questions," he told them. The afternoon stretched before him, empty and predictable. He'd clean his hunting rifle, mend that tear in his winter coat, maybe read more of the astronomy book he'd picked up in town. The simplicity was a balm. No decisions that mattered beyond survival. No one depends on him. No one fails. As dusk approached, he sensed a change in the forest's rhythm. The ravens took flight suddenly, an hour before their usual departure. The chickadees fell silent. Something, or someone, was moving through his territory. Ezra reached for the binoculars he kept by the window. Nothing visible yet, but the disturbance moved closer. He retrieved his rifle from beside the door, checking that it was loaded. Probably just a deer or perhaps a black bear not yet in hibernation. But his instincts, honed by war and wilderness, told him otherwise. That's when he heard it. A sound so foreign to this place that it took him moments to identify it. A child's cough, followed by voices, too distant to make out words but unmistakably human. A woman's voice, then the higher pitch of a child responding. Ezra's heart hammered like a trapped animal trying to escape its cage. 12 years. 12 years without a single unwanted visitor. He moved silently to the window that gave the best view of the approach path. Two figures emerged from the tree line. A woman, tall and slender, her auburn hair visible beneath a knitted cap. She was supporting a smaller figure, a child, bundled in a coat too large, stumbling slightly in the deep snow. They were headed directly for his cabin. Ezra's mind raced through possibilities. Lost hikers who'd somehow found one of his hunting trails. Rangers searching for those missing persons. But rangers would have radios, proper gear. These two looked desperate. He could hide. Douse the lights. Let the wood stove die down. Wait in silence until they pass by. But the temperature will drop below 0 tonight. The child's cough had a wet, troubling sound even at this distance. As a medic, he'd sworn to do no harm. The internal debate became moot as the woman spotted the cabin. Her posture changed immediately, shoulders straightening, pace quickening. She said something to the child, pointing. Hope. He recognized the body language of Hope. They trudged through the snow toward his porch. Ezra stepped back from the window, rifle still in hand but lowered. He hadn't spoken more than a dozen sentences to another human being in months. What would he say to these intruders? The knock, when it came, was sharp and deliberate. Not the tentative tapping of the lost, but the confident rap of someone who had reached their destination. Ezra stood frozen, suddenly aware of his unkempt appearance, the beard he trimmed without care, the flannel shirt worn thin at the elbows, the boots caked with mud. The woman knocked again, louder. "Hello?" she called. "Is anyone there? Please, we need help." The child coughed again, the sound spurring him to action despite his reluctance. Ezra moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. "What do you want?" he called. A moment of silence then. "Ezra? Ezra Blackwood?" Ice formed in his veins. She knew his name. No one knew he was here. No one except... "It's Cordelia. Cordelia Thorne. We met in Portland 13 years ago." The name hit him like a physical blow. Cordelia. Laughing eyes and paint-stained fingers. 3 weeks of forgetting the war awaited his return. A bright spot in the darkness that had enveloped his life. "I don't know anyone by that name," he lied, even as images flooded back. Her apartment above the bookstore, morning light through gauzy curtains, her sketching his profile as he slept. "Please, Ezra. I wouldn't have come if it wasn't important." Her voice dropped lower. "I have someone you need to meet." Something in her tone, a desperation edged with determination, made his hand move almost without conscious decision. He opened the door a crack, rifle visible but not aimed. Cordelia looked older, worn by time and hardship. Her face, once soft with youth, had sharpened, but her eyes, those were the same, intelligent, intense. Beside her stood a girl, perhaps 9 or 10 years old, pale and slight, drowning in an adult's coat. Her auburn hair, the same shade as Cordelia's, was pulled back in a messy braid. But her eyes, Ezra felt the world tilt beneath him. The girl's eyes were his own, that unusual gray-green that his mother had called mountain water eyes. Cordelia's gloved hand rested protectively on the child's shoulder. "This is Juniper," she said. "She's your daughter." "That's not possible," Ezra said. "May we come in?" Cordelia asked. "Juniper's been coughing since yesterday. We've been traveling for days." Every instinct Ezra had cultivated over 12 years of solitude screamed at him to shut the door, to protect the life he'd built, to avoid the complication of these two humans with their needs and their claims. "Come in," he said. "But I want explanations." "It's warm in here," the girl Juniper said. "Take off your wet things," Ezra said. "Hang them by the stove." He watched as Cordelia helped Juniper out of the oversized coat, revealing a thin frame and jeans and a sweater with a unicorn on the front. "When did you last eat?" he found himself asking, the medic's instincts taking over. "We had granola bars this morning," Cordelia answered. "We've been trying to ration what we brought." Ezra moved to the kitchen area, partly to put space between himself and these strangers, partly because feeding them seemed the simplest problem to solve among the many that had just landed on his doorstep. "That cough needs attention," he said. "How long has she had it?" 3 days, Cordelia said. "It got worse after we had to sleep in the car." "You slept in a car in this weather?" "We didn't have much choice. The motel in town was asking too many questions." "Why are you here, Cordelia?" he asked directly. "And don't tell me it's for a family reunion. 12 years I've been here, and suddenly you track me down with a child you claim is mine." "She is yours," Cordelia said firmly. "I found out I was pregnant after you deployed. I tried to contact you through the military, but they said your unit was attacked, that you were missing in action, presumed dead. I was the only survivor. I spent 8 months in military hospitals. Then I disappeared. On purpose. I know that now. It took me a long time to find you. A very long time. Why?" The question was blunt. "Why look at all? Why now?" "We can talk about that later," she said meaningfully. "After dinner. I need to take your temperature, he said to Juniper, and listen to your lungs. The girl nodded, accepting the thermometer under her tongue without protest. Her composure was unnerving. The thermometer beeped, 100.8-degree flash. Not dangerously high, but a definite fever. Breathe deeply, he instructed, placing his stethoscope against her back. The familiar routine of medical assessment calmed him slightly, giving him something concrete to focus on besides the impossible situation. Her lungs sounded congested but not seriously compromised. Probably a bronchial infection, nothing antibiotics couldn't address. She needs medicine, he told Cordelia. I have antibiotics, and she needs to stay warm and hydrated. Do you have antibiotics here? Cordelia looked surprised. I was a medic, he replied tersely. Ezra prepared a dose of antibiotics appropriate for Juniper's size. The familiar calculations grounded him. This, at least, was something he knew how to do. They ate in awkward silence, the only sounds the clink of spoons and Juniper's occasional cough. You have a lot of books, she finally said, breaking the silence. Ezra nodded. Not much else to do in winter. Do you have any stories? She asked. I have some astronomy books with pictures, he offered, and field guides about local wildlife. That's okay. Mom brought my book. We're reading The Secret Garden. It's about a girl who finds a hidden place and brings it back to life, she explained. The parallel was too obvious to ignore. This child, his child, had found his hidden place. After dinner, Ezra set up his single cot for Juniper in the small alcove off the main room that served as his bedroom. He would sleep on the floor by the stove. Cordelia could take the chair that converted to a narrow bed for nights when his back couldn't tolerate the cot. Take these, he said, handing Juniper the antibiotics and a glass of water. Thank you, she said formally. Do you want me to read to you before sleep? Cordelia asked her, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's forehead with a tenderness that made Ezra look away. Juniper nodded, then turned those unsettling eyes to Ezra. Will you listen too? The question was so unexpected that Ezra found himself agreeing before he could consider why. He positioned himself awkwardly at the foot of the cot while Cordelia sat beside Juniper, opening a worn paperback. Cordelia's voice, soft and expressive, filled the small space as she read about Mary Lennox discovering the hidden key to the garden. Juniper's eyes grew heavy, her breathing deepening despite the occasional cough. Within 10 minutes, she was asleep. Cordelia closed the book gently and tucked the blanket around Juniper's shoulders. She gestured for Ezra to follow her back to the main room. Now comes the reckoning, the explanation she'd deferred earlier. I need proof, Ezra said. Cordelia nodded as if she'd expected this. She reached into her backpack and withdrew a faded envelope. I thought you might, she said, handing it to him. This is all I have. Inside was a photograph, colors dulled by time. Ezra stared at a version of himself he barely recognized, younger, in civilian clothes, smiling openly with his arm around Cordelia's waist. This proves we knew each other, he said, unmoved. Nothing more. Look at her, Ezra, Cordelia said. Look at her eyes, her hands, the way she tilts her head when she's thinking. She's yours. Many people have eyes this color. You have a scar, Cordelia said suddenly. On your left shoulder. It looks like a crescent moon. You got it when you were 16, saving a kid from a burning building. Ezra's breath caught. He'd never spoken of that incident to anyone in his unit. It wasn't in his military records. Only someone who had been intimate with him would know. How did you really find me? He asked. It wasn't easy. After I thought you died, I raised Juniper alone. My parents disowned me when I refused to give her up for adoption. I was an unmarried art student with no support system, but we managed. She stared into the fire, shadows playing across her face. Then last year I saw a man in Seattle who looked like you. It wasn't you, too young, wrong build, but it made me wonder, what if the reports were wrong? What if you had survived? So you hired someone to find me? No, I couldn't afford that, Cordelia said. I started with your hometown in Idaho, talked to people who remembered you, found your old commanding officer, who wouldn't tell me anything except that you had survived the attack. Then I tracked down a nurse who worked at the VA hospital where you recovered. She remembered you talking about the Cascades. It still took months of research, Cordelia continued, checking land records, tax assessments, utility hookups. Most led nowhere. But I found a pattern of supply purchases at general stores in 3 different mountain towns. Always the same items, always 6 months apart. I started with the northernmost town and worked my way south. Why? Ezra demanded again. Why go to all that trouble after so many years? What do you want from me? I'm dying, Ezra. Aggressive lung cancer. 6 months, maybe less. Juniper has no one else, she continued, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. My parents still want nothing to do with us. I have no siblings. No close friends who could take on a child. She needs someone who will protect her, teach her to survive. There are systems for this, he said. Foster care. Adoption. Systems fail children every day, Cordelia replied sharply. Especially sensitive, intelligent children like Juniper. She's already showing signs of depression since my diagnosis. She needs stability, connection. She needs her father, a father she's never met, a father who lives in the middle of nowhere by choice, a father who hasn't spoken to another human being for more than 5 minutes in over a decade. Ezra's voice rose slightly. A father who saved a child from a burning building when he was 16, Cordelia countered. A medic who kept men alive under impossible conditions. A man who, despite everything, opened his door to us tonight. I can't be what she needs, he said. I'm not the same person you knew, Cordelia. I'm broken, damaged. I came here because I'm dangerous to others. You're her father, Cordelia said. Ezra laughed. And what does that mean? I don't know the first thing about raising a child. Neither did I, Cordelia replied. You learn, you try, you make mistakes and you fix them. I need time to think, he finally said. You can stay until Juniper's better, then we'll figure something out. It wasn't an agreement, but it wasn't a refusal either. Cordelia nodded, accepting this temporary truce. Thank you. 12 years of carefully constructed solitude, shattered in a single evening. A child who carried his blood, his eyes, sleeping under his roof. A woman from his past, carrying a death sentence and impossible expectations. Ezra woke before dawn, his body stiff from a night spent on the hard floor. For a moment, the events of the previous day seemed like a bizarre dream. Then he heard it, soft breathing from the alcove, the slight wheeze in Juniper's lungs, and the deeper rhythm of Cordelia's sleep from the chairbed. He moved silently through his morning routine, modified to avoid waking his unexpected guests. Physical training outside in the bitter cold instead of in the main room. Coffee made with extra care not to let the kettle whistle. He was checking his snare lines when they finally stirred, the sun now cresting the eastern ridge. When he returned with 2 rabbits for the stew pot, Cordelia was heating water for tea, moving through his kitchen with an ease that irked him. Juniper sat at the table, wrapped in a blanket, looking marginally better than the night before. Your fever's down, he noted after checking her temperature. How's the cough? Better, she said, her voice less raspy. Your medicine helped. Keep taking it for 5 more days, even if you feel completely better, he instructed. Infections can come back stronger if you don't finish the course. Mom says the same thing. She says antibiotics are like soldiers, and they need time to defeat all the enemy germs. The casual mention of war metaphors made Ezra stiffen, memories threatening to surface. He pushed them down, focusing on skinning the rabbits outside while Cordelia prepared a simple breakfast of oatmeal with dried fruit. I need to clear the solar panels, Ezra announced after breakfast, and check the generator. Can I come watch? Juniper asked. Bundle up properly, he conceded, and tell me if you get tired or cold. Juniper donned her coat, still too large for her, with an eagerness that suggested she was used to finding joy in small things. I'll prepare lunch while you're out, she offered. Top shelf is dried goods. Lower cabinet has pots. Use whatever you need, Ezra replied. Outside, the day was bright but frigid, the snow crunching underfoot as Ezra led Juniper to the southern slope where his solar array was mounted. He showed her how to gently brush the snow away without scratching the panels, explaining the basic principles of how they worked. So the sun's energy gets turned into electricity, Juniper summarized, like plants do with photosynthesis. Yes, similar concept. You know about photosynthesis? Juniper nodded. We did experiments in science class with leaves and colored water. You like science? He asked. I like knowing how things work, she replied. Ezra recognized something in her response, a familiar curiosity, a need to understand systems and mechanisms. He'd been the same way as a child, always taking things apart to see their inner workings. Mom says you were a doctor in the army, she said. A medic, Ezra corrected. Not the same as a doctor. I had emergency medical training. Did you help a lot of people? Some, he managed to say, his voice tight. Not all. Juniper seemed to sense his discomfort. She turned her attention back to the solar panels, working in silence for several minutes. I know about basic first aid, she offered eventually. Mom taught me how to clean a cut and make a bandage, how to tell if someone has a fever without a thermometer. That's good knowledge to have. She said my dad was a medic who saved people, Juniper continued casually, and that maybe someday I'd need to save someone too. Saving people isn't always possible, he said. But you try, right? That's what matters. That you try. Let's check the generator next, he said instead of answering, leading her around to the small shed. As they worked through his daily maintenance tasks, Ezra found himself explaining more than was strictly necessary, how the rainwater collection system functioned, why he positioned his snares where he did, which tracks in the snow belonged to which animals. Juniper absorbed it all with keen interest. asking intelligent questions that revealed an observant mind. When they returned to the cabin, the aroma of rabbit stew filled the air. Cordelia had found the herbs he'd dried and hung from the ceiling beams, combining them with his stores to create something more flavorful than his usual utilitarian meals. "The solar panels are clear now," Juniper reported to her mother, "and Ezra showed me deer tracks and rabbit tracks." "That sounds interesting," Cordelia smiled, though Ezra noticed she looked tired, shadows beneath her eyes more pronounced than the day before. After lunch, Juniper's energy flagged. The morning's activities, even limited as they were, had taxed her recovering body. Cordelia settled her on the cot with another dose of antibiotics and their book, reading until the child drifted into sleep. When she emerged from the alcove, Ezra was waiting. "I want a DNA test," he said. Cordelia sighed. "I expected that. It's reasonable. Until then, I need more information," Ezra continued. "About her. About your condition. About what exactly you expect from me." "What do you want to know first?" Cordelia asked. "The cancer. When were you diagnosed?" 3 months ago," she replied. "It started with a persistent cough. By the time they found it, it had already spread to my lymph nodes. They offered treatment, aggressive chemotherapy, radiation, but the prognosis was poor even with intervention." "And you declined treatment?" "I tried 2 rounds of chemotherapy," Cordelia said. "It was brutal. I couldn't care for Juniper, couldn't work, couldn't even get out of bed most days. The doctors said even with the full course, I might gain a year at best, and the quality of that year. I decided I'd rather have 6 good months with my daughter than 12 months of suffering that she would have to witness." "Does Juniper understand what's happening?" "As much as a 10-year-old can," Cordelia said softly. "She knows I'm very sick. She knows that I won't get better. She doesn't know exactly how much time we have left." "I didn't want her counting days." Ezra nodded, respecting the difficult balance Cordelia was trying to maintain. "What about her education? Her health? Does she have any medical conditions I should know about?" I brought her records. Immunization history, school reports, medical history. She's had the usual childhood illnesses, but nothing serious. She's bright, tests well above grade level in reading and science, though she struggles a bit with math. "And what about legal custody?" Ezra asked. "I'm not even listed on her birth certificate, am I?" "No," Cordelia admitted. "When you reported MIA, I didn't see the point. But I've prepared paperwork naming you as her father and granting you custody after my death. It needs your signature and notarization. This is," he searched for words, "a lot to process, Cordelia. You show up after 13 years with a child I never knew existed, tell me you're dying, and expect me to sign papers agreeing to raise her in this cabin in the woods." "I don't expect anything," Cordelia said. I'm asking the father of my child to step up, to be the man I believed you were. The man you believed I was died in that ambush with the rest of his unit." Ezra said. "I've seen how you look at her, Ezra. You recognize yourself in her. You want to deny it because it's easier than accepting responsibility. But she is your flesh and blood, even if she is mine," Ezra said. "What kind of life would she have here? No friends, no school, miles from civilization. This is no place for a child." "It's better than the alternatives," Cordelia insisted. "Foster care is overloaded. The good placements are rare and temporary. Most likely she'd bounce between homes until she aged out of the system. Is that what you want for her?" "What I want," Ezra said with quiet intensity, "is not to have this choice forced upon me, not to be ambushed with a responsibility I never agreed to." "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to. It's not fair what I'm asking. I know that, but life hasn't been fair to any of us. Just get to know her," Cordelia finally said. "While I'm still here, see who she is, then decide." It was both a retreat and a challenge. Ezra knew that the more time he spent with Juniper, the harder it would be to turn her away. Cordelia was banking on that, on the human connection he'd spent 12 years avoiding. "Fine," he conceded, "but I still want that DNA test." Cordelia nodded. "Thank you." The following days fell into an uneasy rhythm. Juniper's health improved steadily with the antibiotics and rest. She began to show more energy, more curiosity about the cabin and its surroundings. He showed her how to identify edible plants, though most were dormant under the snow. He demonstrated how to test ice thickness before crossing a frozen stream. He pointed out the different birds that visited his clearing and explained their winter survival strategies. Juniper absorbed it all with an eagerness that was flattering and unsettling. She watched his hands when he repaired tools, memorizing his movements. She asked questions about the medical supplies he kept, revealing a knowledge of basic anatomy that surprised him. "Mom got me books about the human body," she explained when he asked. "With pictures of all the organs and bones, I know all the bones in the hand." "Why medicine?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Most kids your age are interested in." I don't know what kids are into these days. Bodies are complicated things that can break. Knowing how to fix them seems important. It was the same impulse that had drawn him to emergency medicine, the challenge of understanding complex systems, the satisfaction of making repairs when they failed. On the fourth night, as Cordelia read to Juniper before bed, the child asked a question that caught both adults off guard. "Can Ezra read a chapter tonight?" she asked. "I want to hear how he does the different voices." "I'm not good at voices," he said awkwardly. "Just try one chapter," Juniper persisted. "Please?" Reluctantly, Ezra took the book, finding the marked page. He began to read stiffly, the words foreign in his mouth after so many years of minimal speech. But as the story unfolded, Mary discovering the buried key, the robin showing her the door in the wall, he found himself drawn into the narrative. His voice softened, found its rhythm. He didn't attempt different character voices as Cordelia did, but he found himself emphasizing certain words, pausing for effect at pivotal moments. "You're not bad at reading," she declared. "You just need practice." Later, after Juniper was asleep, Cordelia approached him as he sat by the fire, sketching in his notebook. "What are you drawing?" she asked. Ezra hesitated, then turned the pad so she could see. It was a study of Juniper's hands as she had arranged the medical supplies, her fingers small but precise. "You always did have a good eye for detail," Cordelia said softly. "You used to sketch me when you thought I was sleeping." "I remember," Ezra admitted. "She's starting to trust you," Cordelia said, changing the subject. "I know what you're doing, Cordelia," Ezra replied. "Is it working?" she asked. Ezra sighed, staring into the fire. "I don't know. Maybe. But there are still so many unanswered questions. So many complications. Like what? Like how I'm supposed to raise a child in isolation. Like whether I'm mentally stable enough to be responsible for another human being. Like whether I can bear to watch someone else I'm responsible for if she gets sick or hurt out here, miles from proper medical care. She's stronger than she looks," Cordelia said, "and you're more capable than you give yourself credit for." Before Ezra could respond, a soft sound from the alcove caught their attention. Juniper stood in the doorway, her face troubled. "I had a bad dream," she said. Cordelia started to rise, but Juniper shook her head. "No, not you, Mom. I want." She looked at Ezra, an unspoken request in her eyes. "What was the dream about?" he asked, kneeling to her level. "I was lost in the woods," she said, "and I couldn't find my way back to the cabin. I kept calling, but nobody heard me." The fear of abandonment was palpable in her description. It struck Ezra that Juniper was facing her own form of exile. "I know these woods better than anyone," he said. "If you were lost, I would find you. I can track anything through this forest." "Promise?" Juniper asked. The words stuck in Ezra's throat. Promises were dangerous things. Promises could be broken. "I promise," he said anyway, the words of a contract he wasn't sure he could fulfill but couldn't deny her at this moment. Juniper nodded, apparently satisfied with this assurance. But instead of returning to bed, she moved to the shelf where Ezra kept a small wooden box he'd carved years ago. "What's in here?" she asked. "Just some old things," Ezra said. "Nothing important." "Can I see?" Juniper persisted. Inside were the meager mementos he'd allowed himself to keep. His military dog tags, a smooth riverstone from his childhood home, a small pocket compass that had belonged to his grandfather, and a folded piece of paper. It was this last item that caught Juniper's attention. She lifted it carefully, looking to Ezra for permission before unfolding it. He nodded reluctantly, knowing what she would find. It was a pencil sketch he'd made of Cordelia 13 years ago. "It's Mom," Juniper said with quiet wonder. "She looks so young." "She was," Ezra confirmed. "Why did you keep this?" Juniper asked. "If you didn't know about me and you thought you'd never see her again?" "Some things are hard to let go of," he said finally. Juniper studied him with those eyes that mirrored his own, assessing his answer with a gravity beyond her years. "When I feel sad or scared," she said, "I sing a song Mom taught me." Before Ezra could process this statement, Juniper began to hum a melody that shattered his composure completely. It was a lullaby, simple and haunting, that his mother had sung to him as a child. A song he had occasionally hummed during long nights on watch in the desert, a connection to home when he was far from it. He'd hummed it sometimes in Cordelia's apartment, half-remembered notes rising unbidden during peaceful moments. She had remembered. She had passed it on to their daughter. "You used to hum it when you couldn't sleep," she said quietly. "I didn't know the words, but I remembered the melody. I wanted her to have something of you." Something broke open in Ezra's chest, a sealed chamber suddenly exposed to air. The lullaby, carried through time and distance, was more convincing than any DNA test could ever be. "The words are in Welsh," he said. "My grandmother taught it to my mother. It's about a bird building a nest for its young, promising to keep them safe through winter storms." Juniper's face brightened. "Can you teach me the words?" Ezra hesitated, then nodded. He began to sing softly, the Welsh words awkward after so many years of disuse. Juniper listened intently, then joined in on the second verse, mimicking the unfamiliar syllables with surprising accuracy. Their voices twined together in the warm cabin, his low and hesitant, hers clear and pure. When the song ended, the silence that followed held a different quality than before, no longer tense with unspoken questions, but resonant with shared connection. "Time for bed," Cordelia said gently. Juniper nodded, suddenly looking tired again. But before she returned to the alcove, she turned to Ezra. "Thank you for promising to find me if I get lost," she said seriously. "You planned this?" he said quietly, not looking up at Cordelia. "You knew about the lullaby. You knew what it would mean." "I hoped," Cordelia corrected. "I hoped it would help you see what I've always known, that she belongs with you." Ezra carefully refolded the sketch, returning it to the box along with the other mementos of his former life. But as he closed the lid, he knew that something fundamental had shifted. A week passed. The weather turned briefly milder, allowing longer excursions outside with Juniper, whose health had improved significantly. Ezra found himself sharing more of his survival knowledge, watching with grudging pride as she quickly grasped concepts that had taken him years to master. "You're a natural at this," he told her one afternoon as she successfully struck a fire using flint and steel. "It took me dozens of tries to get that right the first time." Juniper beamed at the praise. "It's like science. You have to understand what makes the spark, and then create the right conditions." "Exactly," Ezra agreed. He had begun to see how his isolated existence, which had seemed so stark and limited before, could be transformed through Juniper's eyes. Meanwhile, Cordelia spent increasing time resting, her energy visibly diminishing as the days progressed. The cancer was taking its toll, or so Ezra believed, noting her pallor and the way she sometimes pressed a hand to her chest when she thought no one was looking. Yet there were inconsistencies that nagged at his medical training. Her symptoms seemed to fluctuate unpredictably. Some mornings she could barely rise from bed, while by afternoon she might join them for a short walk outside. Certain foods she claimed upset her stomach one day would be tolerated fine the next. And then there were the pills. He first noticed them 3 days after their arrival, a small orange prescription bottle tucked deep in her coat pocket when he was hanging it to dry. The label had been partially removed, leaving only a fragment of a name that wasn't Cordelia's. He said nothing, respecting her privacy. Cancer patients often required multiple medications, pain relievers, anti-nausea drugs, sleep aids, but his suspicion was aroused. On the 8th day of their stay, Ezra woke before dawn as usual. He stepped outside to check the weather, finding the world transformed by a fresh dusting of snow that had fallen in the night. The pristine white blanket would make today's planned tracking lesson with Juniper perfect. As he returned to the cabin, he heard a sound from the small bathroom, a muffled sob followed by the distinct rattle of pills in a bottle. He paused, listening. Cordelia's voice, barely audible, whispering urgently to herself. "Just one more, just to get through today. It's for Juniper's sake, for her future." The hair on the back of Ezra's neck rose. Those weren't the words of someone taking prescribed medication for terminal illness. Those were the words of someone struggling with dependency. He retreated silently, processing this new information as he stoked the fire and prepared coffee. When Cordelia emerged some time later, her pupils were noticeably constricted despite the dim morning light, a clear sign of opioid use that his medical training couldn't ignore. "Morning," she said. "It's beautiful out there. Fresh snow?" "About 2 inches," Ezra confirmed. "How are you feeling today?" "Better than yesterday," she replied. He let the lie stand, uncertain how to proceed. Confrontation might drive her away before they had resolved Juniper's future. Juniper was thrilled by the fresh snow when she woke, eager for the tracking lesson Ezra had promised. They spent the morning in the forest, following deer trails and discovering the delicate prints of a fox that had hunted mice beneath the snow. Juniper proved to have a sharp eye, spotting subtle signs that even Ezra sometimes missed. "Mom says I notice too much sometimes," she confided as they examined a perfect rabbit track. "She says it makes me worry about things I shouldn't." "Like what?" Ezra asked. "Just stuff. Like when she's having her tired days and needs extra medicine." "Does she have a lot of tired days?" "More lately," Juniper said. "Sometimes she sleeps all day, or sometimes she's really awake and cleans the whole apartment and makes big plans. But then she gets sick again. And what do you do when she's having a tired day?" "I take care of myself," Juniper said. "I can make sandwiches and soup, and I know how to check if Mom's breathing right or if she needs her medicine." The implication was clear. This 10-year-old had been functioning as a caretaker for her mother during periods of impairment. Anger flared in Ezra's chest, followed quickly by concern. "That's a lot for someone your age to handle." He said. "It's okay," Juniper insisted. Mom says I'm extra responsible. Ezra thought of the pills he'd glimpsed, the whispered self-justification, the inconsistent symptoms, not cancer, addiction. Cordelia was an addict, and she had built an elaborate deception around her condition, possibly believing it herself to some degree. Let's head back, he said, suddenly needing to confront this discovery. The temperature's dropping. When they returned to the cabin, Cordelia was sitting by the fire, sketching in a notebook she'd brought. She looked up with a smile. Successful tracking expedition? She asked, her voice too bright. Very, Juniper answered. We found fox tracks and owl marks and even where a mouse tunneled under the snow. That's wonderful, Cordelia said. Why don't you draw some of the tracks you saw? I have colored pencils in my bag. It was a transparent attempt to occupy Juniper while addressing whatever had darkened Ezra's mood. He allowed it, waiting until the child was settled at the table with paper and pencils before gesturing Cordelia outside. We need to talk, he said. You don't have cancer, do you? Cordelia's face drained of color, but she maintained eye contact. What are you talking about? Of course I do. I explained my diagnosis. You explained a story, Ezra countered. A story with enough medical details to sound convincing to someone who isn't looking too closely. But I am looking now, Cordelia. Your symptoms don't match. Your behavior doesn't match. You're not an oncologist, she said. I know addiction when I see it. The pill bottle with someone else's name. The mood swings. The inconsistent symptoms, Juniper talking about your tired days and how she has to take care of herself when you're impaired. Cordelia flinched at this last detail, genuine shame crossing her features. What are you taking? Oxycodone? Vicodin? Does it matter? Does it change anything about why we're here? It changes everything, Ezra said. You lied to me. You lied to Juniper. You manipulated us both with a terminal illness that doesn't exist. I am dying. Maybe not from cancer, but this will kill me eventually. And Juniper will be left with nothing and no one unless you step up. How long? Ezra asked. It started after a car accident 4 years ago, she said. Broken ribs, damaged vertebrae. They prescribed pain medication for 6 weeks. By week 4, I knew I was in trouble, but I couldn't stop. When the prescriptions ran out, I found other ways to get pills. And Juniper has been witnessing this? Living with this? I tried to protect her. I functioned. I held jobs. I got her to school. I'm not a monster, Ezra. No, you're an addict, he said, and you're using your daughter as leverage to secure her future rather than getting the help you need. I tried rehab, Cordelia said, twice. Couldn't afford the good programs. The state-funded ones were overcrowded, understaffed. I relapsed both times within weeks. So you decided to track me down instead? To dump your responsibility on someone who hasn't been part of your lives for a decade? I decided to find her father, Cordelia corrected. To give her one stable parent before the state takes her away from me. Is that so wrong? You should have told me the truth from the beginning, he said finally. Would you have let us stay if I had? Cordelia challenged. I don't know, he admitted. But lies poison everything they touch, Cordelia, including Juniper. The cabin door opened before Cordelia could respond. Juniper stood in the doorway, her small face tight with anxiety. Why are you fighting? She asked. Is something wrong? Cordelia immediately softened her posture, putting on the mask of reassurance. Nothing's wrong, honey. We're just discussing adult things. About me? Juniper pressed. Are you sending us away? No one's being sent away right now, he said carefully. Your mother and I are working through some misunderstandings. Juniper looked between them, clearly unconvinced. You're angry, I can tell. Is it because of Mom's medicine? Because she needs it when the pain gets bad. Let's go back inside, Ezra suggested, unwilling to expose her to more conflict. We can talk there. In the cabin's warmth, an uncomfortable silence settled over them. Juniper returned to her drawing but kept glancing up, monitoring the adults with the hypervigilance of a child accustomed to unpredictable environments. Juniper, Cordelia finally said, can you go organize your things in the alcove? I need to talk to Ezra alone for a few minutes. You're going to fight again, Juniper said. No, Cordelia promised. No more fighting. Reluctantly, Juniper gathered her drawing materials and retreated to the alcove, though Ezra suspected she would be listening intently. I'm not dying of cancer, Ezra, but I am dying, she said. I'm not living either. I'm barely existing. Juniper deserves better than what I can give her. She loves you, Ezra said simply. Whatever your flaws, she loves you. I know, Cordelia acknowledged. And I love her more than anything. That's why I had to find you. That's why I had to secure her future before an overdose, before child services intervention, before imprisonment for illegal prescription use. What exactly are you proposing now? Ezra asked. I want you to take custody of Juniper. Legally, permanently. She knows you now. She's connecting with you. She's learning from you. She'd be safe here. And you? Ezra pressed. What happens to you in this scenario? I'll go, Cordelia said. Once the paperwork is done, once I know she's settled, I'll leave. The resignation in her voice struck Ezra as fundamentally wrong. A surrender rather than a solution. That's not an answer, he said firmly. That's an abandonment dressed up as a sacrifice. Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what it's been like, raising her alone, fighting this hunger every day. Failing over and over but having to get up anyway because she needs breakfast, needs help with homework, needs a mother who isn't a complete disaster. You're right, Ezra conceded. I don't know what that's like, but I do know what it's like to be haunted by failure. To believe you're too broken to deserve connection. The parallel between them, her addiction, his PTSD-driven isolation, suddenly clarified in sharp relief. They had both retreated from the world in their own ways, both convinced of their fundamental brokenness. What are you saying? Cordelia asked. Before Ezra could answer, a small sound from the alcove caught their attention. Juniper stood in the doorway again, tears streaming silently down her face. You lied, she said, looking directly at her mother. You're not dying of cancer. You're leaving me here. Cordelia's face crumpled. Juniper, you promised, the child continued. After the last time, you promised no more secrets, no more lies. I was trying to protect you, Cordelia said weakly. By lying? By making me think you were dying? Juniper's composure, so remarkable for her age, finally shattered completely. I've been scared every day, counting the time we have left, and it was all fake. Her small body shook with sobs, years of fear and confusion breaking free at once. Ezra moved toward her instinctively, but she backed away from both adults. Don't touch me! You're both liars, she cried. He doesn't want me here, and you don't want me with you. With that, she turned and ran for the door, yanking it open before either adult could react. She bolted into the snow, coatless and wearing only socks on her feet. Juniper! Cordelia screamed. Ezra was faster, grabbing his coat from the hook by the door and plunging into the freezing afternoon air. The temperature had dropped significantly since their tracking expedition that morning. Juniper! He called, his voice echoing across the clearing. Stop! It's not safe. There was no response, only the continued trail of footprints disappearing into the trees. Ezra broke into a run, following her path with rising urgency. The forest would disorient her quickly. In her emotional state, without proper clothing, she would be in serious danger. Behind him, he heard Cordelia calling Juniper's name, her voice raw with panic. He ignored her, focusing solely on the tracks before him. The forest closed around him, shadows lengthening as the winter sun began its early descent. Juniper's tracks remained clear in the fresh snow, but they were becoming erratic, zigging and zagging as if she were running without direction, simply trying to get as far away as possible. Then, abruptly, the pattern changed. The footprints showed she had slowed, perhaps realizing the danger of her impulsive flight. They meandered for several yards before stopping completely at the base of a massive cedar. Ezra approached cautiously, listening. A quiet sniffling came from behind the tree. Juniper? He called softly. It's Ezra. Go away, came the muffled response. Leave me alone. He circled the tree, finding her huddled against the trunk, arms wrapped around her knees, shivering violently. Her socks were soaked through, her lips already taking on a bluish tinge. You're freezing, he said. Hypothermia is setting in. We need to get you warm. I don't care, she said. I hate both of you. That's fair, Ezra acknowledged. You have every right to be angry, but punishing yourself won't fix anything. He removed his coat, wrapping it around her, despite her half-hearted attempts to push it away. Your mom made a terrible mistake, he continued. She lied to you and to me. But she did it because she loves you and was terrified of losing you. If she loved me, she wouldn't lie, Juniper countered. People who love us still hurt us sometimes, Ezra said. Sometimes because they're trying to protect us in the wrong way. Sometimes because they're fighting battles we can't see. Juniper looked up at him. Is she really sick? Or was it all made up? Your mom is sick, he said. Not with cancer, but with another kind of illness. One that affects her thinking and her choices sometimes. It makes her need medicine that isn't always good for her. Her pills, the ones she hides, the ones that make her sleep too much or talk too fast. Yes, Ezra confirmed. It's called addiction, and it's a real illness that needs treatment. Your mom has been trying to fight it alone for a long time, and that's very hard to do. Is that why we came here? Because she needs help fighting it? I think part of her hoped for that, Ezra said carefully. But she was also thinking of you. What would happen to you if her illness got worse? And what about you? She asked suddenly. Do you have an illness too? Is that why you live alone in the woods? The direct question caught Ezra off guard. He had never framed his PTSD and isolation in terms of illness. Yes, he admitted, the truth emerging before he could censor it. A different kind. Mine is in my memories and the things I saw during the war. It makes me afraid to be around people sometimes. Afraid I'll fail them like I failed my friends. Juniper nodded. So you're both sick, but in different ways. I suppose that's accurate, Ezra agreed. Can you get better? She asked. Both of you? With the right help, yes, Ezra said. People recover from both these illnesses. It's hard work and it takes time, but it happens every day. I still don't want to be sent away, she said finally. Not to strangers. I know, Ezra said, remembering his promise from days earlier, and I meant what I said before. I would find you if you were lost. We should head back, Ezra said, standing and offering his hand. Your feet need attention. Snow exposure can cause frostbite quickly. Juniper took his hand without hesitation, a small but significant gesture of trust. Will you help Mom get better? She asked as they began walking. Before she goes away? The question pierced Ezra's defenses completely. This child, his child, was asking him to heal her mother, to prevent another abandonment in her young life. I'll try, he promised. We'll try together. Back at the cabin, Cordelia's frantic relief at seeing Juniper safe quickly gave way to the reality of their new situation. The pretense had been shattered. The truth, or at least part of it, was now in the open. What remained was to determine a path forward. Ezra focused first on treating Juniper's feet, which showed early signs of frostnip, a precursor to frostbite. He soaked them in lukewarm water, gradually increasing the temperature as circulation returned, explaining each step of the process to distract her from the painful tingling of warming tissue. The body constricts blood vessels in extreme cold, he told her, medical training providing a comfortable script. It's trying to preserve core temperature by reducing flow to the extremities. When we rewarm too quickly, the vessels dilate rapidly, causing pain and potential damage. That's why we start with lukewarm water, not hot. Juniper nodded. Like when you temper chocolate in baking, she offered. You have to warm it gradually, or it seizes up. Exactly, Ezra said. Cordelia hovered nearby, clearly wanting to help but uncertain of her welcome after the day's revelations. She looked pale and jittery, likely approaching withdrawal as her last dose of pills wore off. When Juniper's feet were properly treated and wrapped in dry socks, Ezra helped her settle on the cot with a cup of hot tea and a book. Try to rest, he told her. We'll talk more later, I promise. In the main room, Cordelia paced anxiously, her hands trembling slightly. The mask had fallen completely now, revealing the physical dependency that had been partially hidden beneath the cancer narrative. We need to talk, Ezra said quietly, gesturing toward the porch. About what happens next. How many pills do you have left? Cordelia looked startled by the bluntness of the question. Why does that matter now? You know the truth. You probably want us gone as soon as possible. Answer the question, Cordelia, Ezra insisted. How many? 3, maybe 4, she admitted reluctantly. And when they're gone, what's your plan then? She laughed bitterly. There is no plan, there never is. Find more somehow. Suffer when I can't. The same cycle I've been trapped in for years. Ezra nodded, having expected as much. I'm giving you 2 options, he said. First option, you leave tomorrow, alone. I keep Juniper here, safe and cared for, while you go back to whatever life you've been living. I'll have a lawyer draw up temporary custody papers. Cordelia flinched as if struck. You'd separate us? After everything? I'm not finished, Ezra continued steadily. Second option, you stay, both of you, but you detox here under my supervision. No more pills, no more lies. You get clean, and we figure out what happens next together. Detox. Here? In the middle of nowhere? Are you serious? Completely, Ezra confirmed. I have medical training. I have supplies to manage the worst of the withdrawal symptoms, and most importantly, there's no way to get more pills out here. No dealers, no emergency rooms to manipulate, no prescriptions to forge. It would be hell, Cordelia whispered. You don't understand what withdrawal is like. I do, actually, Ezra countered. I've treated soldiers with dependency issues. I've seen withdrawal up close. It is hell, but it's a hell you walk through, not one you live in permanently. And if I choose option 1, if I leave Juniper with you, then you'll be proving that your addiction is stronger than your love for your daughter, Ezra said bluntly. That's not fair, Cordelia protested weakly. None of this is fair, Ezra agreed. Not to Juniper, who's been living with your addiction and lies. Not to you, caught in a disease that's destroying your life. Not to me, suddenly faced with a daughter I never knew and responsibilities I never sought. But we're here now, and fairness isn't the point anymore. Doing what's right is. I don't know if I can do it, she admitted, voice breaking. I've tried before and failed every time. You'll have help this time, Ezra said. Medical help. And Juniper will be here. Safe, seeing you fight for recovery instead of hiding behind lies. What if I fail again? What happens to her then? Then at least she'll know you tried. Ezra said simply, "That you loved her enough to face the hardest thing in your life. And she'll still have me." The last statement emerged without conscious thought, a commitment he hadn't planned to make but now recognized as inevitable. Cordelia wiped at her tears with shaking hands. "When would we start?" "Tonight," Ezra said firmly. He expected resistance, bargaining, perhaps even a last-ditch attempt to hide some pills in reserve. Instead, Cordelia reached into her pocket and withdrew the orange bottle, handing it over with a finality that spoke of both surrender and the first fragile step toward reclaiming her life. "4 left," she confirmed. Ezra examined the label, oxycodone, 30 mg, prescribed to someone named Robert Jennings. A powerful dose. The withdrawal would be severe. "We'll get through it," he said. "Let's tell Juniper what's happening. She deserves to understand." Inside, they found Juniper still awake, watching them intently as they entered. The wariness in her expression cut Ezra deeply. No child should have to be so vigilant, so prepared for adult failures. "Your mother and I have made a decision," he said, sitting beside her on the cot. "She's going to stay here and get treatment for her illness. It will be difficult and she'll need our support." Juniper's eyes widened slightly. "She's not leaving?" "No," Cordelia said. "I'm not leaving you. I'm going to get better. For real this time." "You promised that before," Juniper said. "I know," Cordelia acknowledged. "And I failed you then. But this time is different. This time we have help." She glanced at Ezra. "And this time you'll see everything. No more secrets." "Will it be scary?" Juniper asked. "Parts of it will be," Ezra answered honestly. "Your mom's body has become dependent on medicine it shouldn't have. When that medicine is gone, her body will react strongly until it learns to function normally again. She'll be uncomfortable and sometimes in pain. Like having a really bad flu," Cordelia added. "But Ezra knows how to help," Juniper confirmed. "I do," he said, the responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. "I have medicines that will make it easier, not painless, but easier. And I've helped people through this before." "When does it start?" Juniper asked. "Soon," Cordelia answered, already showing the first subtle signs of withdrawal, a fine sheen of sweat on her forehead, pupils beginning to dilate. "Tonight or tomorrow morning, depending on how quickly my body reacts." Ezra spent the evening preparing, organizing his medical supplies, setting up a makeshift sick room in the main cabin area, reviewing his mental inventory of withdrawal management protocols. He brewed willow bark tea to help with the fever and pain that would come, and prepared a rehydration solution with salt, sugar, and water to combat the inevitable fluid loss. Cordelia grew increasingly agitated as the hours passed, her body sensing the coming deprivation. She paced, scratched unconsciously at her arms, and checked the clock obsessively. "Try to sleep while you can," Ezra advised her. "Once it starts in earnest, rest will be difficult." "I can't sleep," she said. "My skin feels wrong. Everything feels wrong." "That's the beginning," he confirmed. Juniper watched this exchange with worried eyes, already understanding more than a child her age should about the mechanics of addiction. "You should sleep," he told Juniper gently. "Tomorrow will be challenging for all of us." She nodded reluctantly, but instead of going to the alcove, she dragged her blanket to the chair nearest Cordelia. "I want to stay close," she insisted, "in case Mom needs me." "I appreciate that. But this time, the adults will take care of the situation. Your job is to rest and take care of yourself." Juniper looked unconvinced, but eventually settled into the chair, blanket pulled up to her chin, eyes tracking her mother's restless movements until exhaustion finally claimed her. By midnight, Cordelia's withdrawal had progressed to moderate severity. She alternated between chills and sweating, her muscles cramping painfully. Ezra administered the herbal remedies he'd prepared, along with a carefully measured dose of over-the-counter medications from his supplies. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Cordelia asked. "Yes," Ezra confirmed, helping her sip water. "The worst usually hits between 24 and 72 hours, but we'll manage it in stages. I've never made it past day 2, she admitted. "There are no ways out here," Ezra reminded her. As dawn approached, Juniper woke to find her mother curled on a pallet near the fire, shivering despite the blankets piled over her. Ezra sat nearby, monitoring her condition while making notes in a journal. "Is she okay?" Juniper asked. "She's experiencing withdrawal symptoms," Ezra explained. "Her body is working hard to adjust to functioning without the medication it's become dependent on." "It looks painful," Juniper observed. "It is. But the pain is part of healing in this case. Like setting a broken bone, it hurts terribly in the moment, but it's necessary for proper healing." Juniper nodded. "What can I do to help?" "You can help prepare the willow bark tea," he decided, "and keep track of when she last had water. Hydration is very important during this process." Juniper took to these tasks with the same serious attention she'd shown toward learning survival skills, creating a neat chart to log Cordelia's fluid intake and the timing of various interventions. By evening, Cordelia had entered what Ezra recognized as the most difficult phase of acute withdrawal. Her symptoms intensified: violent tremors, profuse sweating, abdominal cramping that left her gasping. Worse, the psychological symptoms began to manifest: extreme anxiety, irritability, and the beginning of sensory disturbances. "There are bugs," she mumbled, scratching frantically at her arms. "Under my skin. Get them out. Please get them out." "There are no bugs," Ezra said firmly. "It's a hallucination caused by the withdrawal. Your nervous system is misfiring." "Make it stop," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "I can't do this. I need something. Just a little, just to take the edge off." "You can do this," Ezra insisted. "You're already doing it." Hour by hour, Juniper, who had been boiling water for more tea, approached cautiously. "Mom, I made you some tea with honey. It might help your throat." Cordelia's focus shifted to her daughter. "Juniper," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." "It's okay," Juniper said. "Ezra says you're doing really well, that your body is fighting hard." "Thank you, sweetheart," she managed. That night was the hardest. Cordelia's condition deteriorated further: vomiting that left her weak and dehydrated, muscle cramps that contorted her body, moments of delirium when she didn't recognize where she was or who was with her. Ezra maintained his vigil, employing every technique he knew to ease her suffering without compromising the detoxification process. Near dawn, during a brief period when Cordelia had fallen into exhausted sleep, Juniper approached Ezra with a cup of coffee she'd prepared for him. "You haven't slept," she observed. "I'll rest when the acute phase passes," he assured her. "Probably tomorrow or the next day." Juniper sat beside him. "She's never fought this hard before," she said quietly. "In the rehab places, she always gave up when it got really bad." "What's different this time, do you think?" Ezra asked. "Maybe because of you," she said finally. "Because you're helping but not feeling sorry for her. And because," she hesitated, "because I'm watching. She knows I can see everything." "I think you're right," Ezra acknowledged. "And that's a good thing, even though it's difficult to watch." "Will she be different after?" Juniper asked. "When the medicine is gone from her body will be free of the physical dependency, yes. But addiction is complicated. The cravings can continue for a long time. The habits and patterns of thinking that led to addiction don't disappear overnight. So she could go back to taking pills, even after all this pain?" "She could," Ezra confirmed. "Recovery isn't a straight line. Many people relapse before achieving lasting sobriety. But each attempt builds knowledge and strength for the next try." Juniper absorbed this. "It's like when I was learning to ride a bike," she said eventually. "I fell a lot of times before I could stay up, but each time I learned something new about balancing." "That's an excellent analogy," Ezra said. "The important thing is to keep trying, and to have support when you fall. Like you're supporting Mom now," Juniper concluded, "and like I'm supporting both of you." "Yes," he said simply. "We're all supporting each other." By the afternoon of the third day, the worst of the acute withdrawal symptoms had begun to subside. Cordelia was weak and exhausted, but the vomiting had stopped, the tremors had lessened, and her mind was clear for longer stretches. "I think I might live after all," she said weakly. "You're through the most dangerous part," he confirmed. "The acute withdrawal is subsiding. Now comes the recovery phase, rebuilding strength, managing ongoing symptoms, addressing the psychological aspects." "I've never made it this far before," Cordelia admitted. "It always seemed impossible, like climbing a mountain that kept growing taller." "You had good reason to keep climbing this time," Ezra said. "She shouldn't have had to see any of this. I tried so hard to shield her over the years, to be functional enough that she wouldn't know how bad it was." "She knew," Ezra said. "Children always know when something's wrong, even if they don't understand exactly what it is. She has your way of seeing patterns, connections, your focus, the acknowledgement of their shared traits. This confirmation of their biological connection beyond the physical resemblance settled something in Ezra's mind. Whatever doubts he might have harbored about Juniper's paternity had been resolved. "What happens now?" Cordelia asked. "Now we rebuild," Ezra said simply. "Your health, Juniper's trust, our understanding of what comes next." The plural pronouns, we, our, emerged naturally, reflecting the reality that their lives had become intertwined in ways that couldn't be easily untangled. As if summoned by their conversation, Juniper stirred and opened her eyes, immediately checking her mother's condition with the vigilance that had become habitual. "You look better," she observed, coming to sit beside Cordelia. "I feel better," Cordelia confirmed, "thanks to both of you." "You did the hard part," Ezra reminded her. "What happens after you get better?" Juniper asked the question directly and unavoidably. "Do we stay here? Do we go back home? What about school and stuff?" Ezra and Cordelia exchanged a glance, both realizing they had been so focused on surviving the withdrawal that they hadn't discussed what would follow. "We haven't figured that out yet," Ezra admitted, "but we will, together. For now, the priority is getting your mom completely well and making sure you're safe and cared for." "Can I stay here while we figure it out?" Juniper asked. "I like learning about the forest and the animals, and I want to see the garden you mentioned when the snow melts." "Yes," he said without hesitation. "You can stay as long as needed, both of you." Cordelia's eyes filled with tears, of relief, of gratitude, perhaps of something more complex. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for not turning us away that first night, for helping me through this, for giving Juniper a chance to get to know her father." "I didn't have much choice," Ezra said dryly. "You made sure of that with your persistence." "Sorry for ambushing you," Cordelia said. "Not sorry it worked, though." The following week brought gradual improvement. Cordelia regained strength slowly. The post-acute withdrawal symptoms, insomnia, anxiety, occasional muscle pain, requiring ongoing management but no longer debilitating. Ezra developed a recovery regimen combining nutrition, gentle exercise, and medicinal herbs known to support healing. Juniper thrived in the structured environment that emerged from the crisis. With her mother's health stabilizing, she could focus on learning and exploration rather than vigilant caretaking. Ezra found himself adapting to their presence with surprising ease. The routines he had maintained for years shifted to accommodate their needs, but the adjustments felt natural rather than intrusive. He began teaching Juniper more formally, mathematics using practical applications like calculating supplies, science through direct observation of natural systems, literature from the books he had accumulated over years of solitude. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Juniper reading while the adults talked quietly, Cordelia broached the subject they had been carefully avoiding. "We need to discuss what happens next," she said. "Real plans, not just vague ideas about figuring it out later." Ezra nodded. "You're right. Juniper needs stability, education, and legal clarity about her situation. And I need ongoing support for my recovery," Cordelia added frankly. What happened here was just the beginning. Without a solid plan, without regular therapy and accountability, relapse is almost certain eventually. "What are you proposing?" he asked. "I think we should consider moving to the nearest town with adequate services. Somewhere Juniper can attend school, I can access recovery support, and you." She hesitated. "You can decide how involved you want to be in our lives going forward." "I can't leave the cabin," he said automatically. "My life is here." "Is it? Or is this where you've been hiding from life?" The question struck uncomfortably close to truth. His wilderness existence, while requiring genuine skills and discipline, had also been an escape from memories, from potential failure, from the messy complexity of human connection. "You don't have to decide immediately," Cordelia continued, "and you don't have to change everything at once. But Juniper deserves a father who's part of her life, not just a memory or an occasional visit." From the corner where she sat reading, Juniper spoke up unexpectedly. "I want both of you," she said simply, looking up from her book. "I know you don't love each other or anything, but I want both of you in my life." "We want that too," Cordelia assured her. "We're just trying to figure out how to make it work with our complicated situations." "There's something else we need to consider," he said finally. "Legal issues. Guardianship, school enrollment, medical decisions. Those require documentation, official recognition of my paternity." "I brought the paperwork," Cordelia reminded him. "It just needs your signature and notarization." "And what about your legal situation?" Ezra pressed. "If you've been obtaining prescription medication illegally, there could be consequences once you're back in the system." Cordelia nodded. "That's a risk," she acknowledged. "But facing those consequences is part of recovery too. I can't keep running from what I've done. We should take this one step at a time," Ezra suggested. "First, establish legal paternity, so I have standing to make decisions regarding Juniper's welfare. Then explore options for education, living arrangements, support services." "And your involvement?" Cordelia asked directly. Before he could formulate an answer, a sharp knock at the door froze them all in place. In 12 years, no one had found Ezra's cabin uninvited, no one except Cordelia and Juniper. The sound of another human presence outside their door was so unexpected, so jarring, that for a moment they simply stared at each other in confusion. The knock came again, more insistent. A woman's voice called through the wood. "Hello? Is anyone home? This is Patricia Reeves from Child Protective Services. I need to speak with the occupants regarding a child named Juniper Thorne." The name of the agency, Child Protective Services, sent a visible tremor through Cordelia. Her face drained of color, hands clenching reflexively in her lap. This was the threat that had driven her desperate search for Ezra, the intervention she had been trying to forestall by securing Juniper's future. "How did they find us?" she whispered. Ezra's mind raced through possibilities. The store owner in town, he realized. She mentioned missing hikers, a mother and daughter. Your car was found abandoned. They must have been searching. Juniper looked between them, fear replacing her earlier composure. "Are they going to take me away?" "No," Ezra said firmly. "Stay calm. Let me handle this." He moved to the door, composing his features into the neutral expression he had perfected during military debriefings. When he opened it, he found a middle-aged woman in practical winter gear, a clipboard clutched in gloved hands. Behind her, a county sheriff's deputy waited at a respectful distance, his vehicle barely visible through the trees at the edge of the clearing. "Mr. Blackwood?" the woman asked. "Yes," Ezra confirmed. "How can I help you?" "I'm Patricia Reeves from Child Protective Services," she repeated, her tone professional but not unfriendly. "We've been searching for a minor named Juniper Thorne and her mother, Cordelia Thorne. Their vehicle was found abandoned on a Forest Service road about 20 miles from here. A storekeeper in town mentioned you might have seen them during your supply run." "They're here," Ezra said. "They arrived about 2 weeks ago. The child had bronchitis, and they needed shelter. I provided medical care and accommodation while she recovered." Ms. Reeves studied him with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to evaluating family situations quickly. "And your relationship to them is?" "I'm Juniper's biological father," Ezra stated, "though I only learned of her existence when they arrived." "I see. That's not indicated in any of her records. May I come in and speak with them? It's quite cold out here." "Of course," he said, stepping back to allow her entry. "The deputy can wait outside. This is a private family matter." Ms. Reeves nodded to the deputy, who returned to his vehicle, apparently satisfied that there was no immediate danger requiring his presence. "Miss Thorne," the social worker greeted Cordelia, "we've been quite concerned about your whereabouts. You missed Juniper's scheduled school conference, and when neighbors reported not seeing either of you for several days, we initiated a welfare check. I'm sorry for the worry we caused." Cordelia said, "We needed to find Juniper's father. It was important that they meet. I understand Mr. Blackwood has just told me he's Juniper's biological father, though this isn't reflected in her records. Can you explain the circumstances?" Over the next hour, a careful version of their story emerged. Cordelia and Ezra's brief relationship 13 years ago, his military service and reported MIA status, Cordelia raising Juniper alone, and her recent decision to find him so that Juniper could know her father. "And you've been staying here for 2 weeks? In this rather remote location?" "Juniper was ill when they arrived," Ezra explained. "I have medical training from my military service. It seemed safer to treat her here than risk traveling in her condition. And now that she's recovered?" she pressed. "What are your plans?" "We were just discussing that when you arrived," Cordelia said. "We're exploring options that would allow Juniper to return to school while maintaining her connection with both parents." Miss Reeves turned her attention to Juniper, her tone softening. "And how do you feel about all this, Juniper? About meeting your father and staying here?" "I like it here," she said firmly. "Ezra's teaching me about the forest and animals and first aid, and he helped Mom when she was sick too. Mrs. Thorne has been ill as well." Ezra intervened smoothly. "A complication of Juniper's bronchitis. Respiratory infections can be quite contagious. She's recovering well." "I see. Well, while I appreciate the explanation for your unexpected journey, there are several concerns that need to be addressed." She turned a page on her clipboard. "First, Juniper has now missed nearly 3 weeks of school. Second, there's the matter of establishing legal paternity if Mr. Blackwood is indeed her biological father. And third, this living situation," she gestured to the isolated cabin, "while perhaps adequate temporarily, raises questions about appropriate accommodation for a child in the long term. We understand these concerns," he said carefully, "and we're prepared to address them. I've agreed to formal paternity testing and legal recognition of my relationship to Juniper. We're discussing appropriate educational arrangements and living situations that would serve her best interests." "That's commendable," Ms. Reeves acknowledged. "However, until these matters are formally resolved, I'll need to make an initial assessment for my report. This will include individual interviews with each of you and an inspection of the living conditions." Over the following hours, Ms. Reeves conducted her assessment with professional efficiency. She interviewed Ezra privately first, asking detailed questions about his military service, his reasons for living in isolation, his relationship with Juniper, and his plans for involvement in her future. "I understand you've been essentially off the grid for 12 years, she noted during their conversation. "That's an unusual choice for someone with your background and training. May I ask why?" "I served as a combat medic," he said finally. "My entire unit was killed in an ambush. I was the only survivor, and I didn't handle that well. The isolation was initially about healing, about finding peace with what happened. Over time, it became a way of life. Many veterans struggle with similar issues. Have you received any treatment or counseling for this trauma? Not formally, Ezra admitted, but I've developed coping mechanisms. The structure and discipline of this life has been therapeutic in its own way. And you believe you can adapt that life to include a child. I'm willing to make whatever changes are necessary for Juniper's well-being, he said. If that means relocating closer to town, establishing connections with schools and medical providers, reintegrating with society to some degree, I'll do it. The commitment, spoken aloud to this stranger, crystallized something within him. The isolated existence he had built was not more valuable than his daughter's needs. Cordelia's interview followed. Through the closed door, Ezra could hear only murmurs, unable to determine how much she revealed about her addiction and recovery. Juniper's turn came last, the social worker speaking with her in gentle tones while encouraging honest responses. When the interviews were complete, Ms. Reeves conducted a thorough inspection of the cabin, noting the adequate food supplies, the clean water source, the medical provisions, the books and educational materials Ezra had been using with Juniper. She made detailed notes about the sleeping arrangements, the heating system, and the security measures. Based on my observations today, she began, her tone professional, I can see that Juniper is physically healthy, well-nourished, and appears to have a positive relationship with both her mother and Mr. Blackwood. The living conditions, while rustic, meet basic safety and health requirements. However, Ms. Reeves continued, there are several issues that must be addressed before I can make a final recommendation regarding custody arrangements. She turned to a fresh page in her notes. First, formal paternity testing must be completed to establish Mr. Blackwood's legal relationship to Juniper. Second, a sustainable plan for Juniper's education must be developed, whether that's enrollment in the local school, a formal homeschooling curriculum approved by the district, or some combination. Third, regular medical checkups must be arranged with a pediatrician. Lastly, Ms. Reeves said, I have concerns about some inconsistencies in your explanation of recent events. Ms. Thorne, during our private conversation, you mentioned health issues that don't align with the respiratory infection described earlier. I'd like to better understand your current medical situation and how it might impact your ability to care for Juniper. Before she could respond, Juniper spoke up unexpectedly. Mom was sick with addiction. Ezra helped her get better. She doesn't take the bad medicine anymore. I see, she said carefully. Could you elaborate on that, Ms. Thorne? I've been struggling with prescription drug dependency for several years, Cordelia admitted. Opioid painkillers originally prescribed for injuries from a car accident. When I realized I was at risk of losing custody of Juniper because of my addiction, I decided to find her father, to ensure she would have at least one stable parent. And the cancer story Juniper mentioned earlier? A lie, Cordelia acknowledged. I wasn't sure Ezra would help us if he knew the truth about my addiction. I convinced myself the deception was justified if it secured Juniper's future. Ezra stepped in, sensing Cordelia's increasing distress. When I discovered the truth, I gave Cordelia an ultimatum. Detox here under my medical supervision, or leave Juniper with me and go. She's been clean for 11 days now, through the worst of the acute withdrawal. That's a significant disclosure, and it does change my assessment considerably. Recovery from opioid addiction is challenging, and relapse rates are high without proper support systems. I know, Cordelia said quietly. That's why we were discussing relocation to a town with access to recovery services, counseling, support groups. I'm committed to maintaining sobriety, whatever it takes. And you, Mr. Blackwood? Ms. Reeves turned to Ezra. Are you prepared to potentially become Juniper's primary caregiver if Ms. Thorne struggles with recovery? Yes, he said without hesitation. I would do whatever necessary to ensure her well-being. Ms. Reeves made additional notes. Juniper, how would you feel about living with your father if your mother needed to focus on her recovery? I want Mom to get better, she said carefully. And I want to know my dad better too. Can't we all stay together while Mom keeps getting better? Ms. Reeves smiled slightly. That's a thoughtful suggestion, Juniper. Family-based recovery can indeed be very effective in some cases. She turned to address all of them. Based on what I've learned today, I'll be making the following preliminary recommendations. First, temporary joint custody pending formal paternity confirmation, with primary physical custody to Mr. Blackwood given the stability of his situation compared to Ms. Thorne's ongoing recovery needs. Second, Ms. Reeves continued, enrollment in addiction recovery services for Ms. Thorne, including regular drug testing and counseling. Third, appropriate educational arrangements for Juniper to be determined within the next 2 weeks. And fourth, a follow-up assessment in 30 days to evaluate progress and make more permanent recommendations. She closed her notebook decisively. This gives you a framework to move forward while addressing the core concerns. I should note that this is more flexible than our typical approach, largely because Juniper appears well-adjusted, and there's clear evidence of positive family dynamics despite the challenging circumstances. Ezra felt a weight lift from his shoulders, not because all problems were solved, but because a path forward had emerged, one that recognized their efforts and allowed them to continue as a family unit, however unconventional. "Thank you," he said simply. "This is just the beginning," Ms. Reeves cautioned as she prepared to leave. "There will be regular check-ins, paperwork, appointments. The system is designed to provide support but also accountability." "We understand," Cordelia assured her. After providing them with a folder of forms, contact information, and resources, Ms. Reeves departed with the deputy who had waited patiently in his vehicle. The three of them sat in the quiet cabin, processing the implications of the social worker's visit and recommendations. "That went better than I expected," Cordelia finally said. "I was sure she would take Juniper immediately when she learned about the addiction." "She's good at her job," Ezra observed. Looking at the whole picture, not just isolated problems, she saw that Juniper is safe and well cared for here despite the complications. Juniper spoke up hesitantly. "Does this mean we can stay together, all of us?" "It means we have a chance to build something together," Ezra said carefully. "Not exactly like a traditional family maybe, but something that works for us, for you. We'll need to make changes," Cordelia added. "Find a place closer to town, arrange for your schooling, set up my recovery support system. But we'll do it together?" Juniper pressed. "Together?" Ezra affirmed. "One step at a time." The following month brought rapid changes to their lives. With Ms. Reeves' guidance, they located a small house on the outskirts of the nearest town, close enough for Juniper to attend school and Cordelia to access recovery services, yet private enough to ease Ezra's transition back to more populated surroundings. The formal paternity test confirmed what they already knew, and legal recognition of Ezra's status as Juniper's father followed swiftly. Cordelia enrolled in an intensive outpatient program for addiction recovery, attending daily therapy sessions and support group meetings. The structure provided the accountability she needed, while the compassion of fellow recovering addicts gave her hope that sustainable sobriety was possible. Juniper started at the local school, initially struggling with the social dynamics after her isolated experience, but gradually finding her place. Ezra maintained his cabin as a retreat, visiting regularly to check on his systems and continue some aspects of his self-sufficient lifestyle. But he spent most nights at the small house in town, gradually acclimating to the presence of neighbors, the sounds of distant traffic, the rhythm of a more conventional existence. 6 months after Ms. Reeves' initial visit, she returned for a comprehensive follow-up assessment. She found a functioning household, not perfect, not without challenges, but stable in the ways that mattered most. Cordelia had maintained her sobriety, though the daily struggle was evident in her sometimes haunted eyes. Ezra had begun seeing a counselor specializing in military trauma, and Juniper was thriving, her natural intelligence nurtured by education and her emotional security strengthened by the presence of 2 parents committed to her well-being. "You've made remarkable progress," Ms. Reeves noted. "All the benchmarks we established have been met or exceeded." "It hasn't been easy," Cordelia acknowledged. "There are still days when the cravings are almost overwhelming, when I wonder if I can really do this for the long haul. And yet you continue to make the right choices, one day at a time," Ms. Reeves observed. "That's the definition of recovery." Ezra spoke up. "We've been discussing the next phase," he said. "Now that the immediate crisis is past and we've established a functional routine, what are you considering?" Ms. Reeves asked. "A more permanent living arrangement," Ezra explained. "This rental has served its purpose, but it's not ideal for the long term. I've been looking at properties that would combine aspects of my previous lifestyle with the accessibility Juniper and Cordelia need. A compromise between isolation and integration," Cordelia clarified. "And the nature of your relationship?" she asked directly. "How are you defining your family structure moving forward?" "We're co-parents," Cordelia said simply. "Friends, perhaps, though that seems inadequate for what we've been through together. Allies, definitely. Family," Ezra added. "Not in the traditional sense, but in the ways that matter. We're committed to Juniper's well-being and to supporting each other's healing journeys." Ms. Reeves nodded, apparently satisfied with this honest assessment. "That's refreshingly realistic. Too often, families try to force conventional structures that don't suit their unique circumstances." She made a final note in her file before closing it decisively. "Based on my observations and the documented progress, I'll be recommending closure of Juniper's case with periodic check-ins as a precautionary measure. She's clearly in a stable, supportive environment with both parents actively engaged in her upbringing. The official acknowledgement of their success, of the family they had forged from such unlikely beginnings, brought unexpected emotion to Ezra's throat. Later that evening, after Ms. Reeves had departed and Juniper had gone to bed, Ezra and Cordelia sat on the small porch of the rental house, watching the stars emerge in the early spring sky. The silence between them was comfortable, built on months of navigating challenges together. "Did you ever imagine this?" Cordelia asked finally, "when I showed up at your cabin with that ridiculous cancer story?" "Not remotely," he admitted. "I thought you were running some kind of scam, or that you were delusional." "I was," Cordelia said. "Addiction is its own kind of delusion. It rewrites reality to justify its demands." "And now?" Ezra asked. "Now I'm learning to live in actual reality," she said simply, "with all its complications and disappointments, but also its unexpected gifts. Like finding that the man I barely knew 13 years ago would become the most reliable person in my life when everything was falling apart. We should tell Juniper about the case closing tomorrow," he suggested, "and start involving her more directly in the plans for a permanent home. She has good instincts about what would work for all of us." "She asked me yesterday if we could have chickens," Cordelia said with a laugh. "Apparently someone at school has backyard hens, and now she's fascinated by the idea of collecting eggs every morning." "Chickens are practical," Ezra noted. "Good protein source, minimal maintenance if properly set up. Always the survivalist. Old habits," he acknowledged, "but adaptable to new circumstances." The conversation drifted to other topics. Juniper's upcoming science project, a promising job lead for Cordelia at the local library, Ezra's tentative agreement to teach a wilderness first aid course at the community center. As night deepened around them, Ezra found himself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them to this point. The knock on his door that had shattered 12 years of isolation, the desperate lie that had concealed a deeper truth, the child whose existence had reconnected him to a world he had been determined to leave behind. "We should head in," Cordelia said. "Early day tomorrow." Ezra nodded, following her inside. At the doorway to his room, Ezra paused. "Do you ever regret finding me? Given everything that followed, all the complications, the scrutiny?" "No," she said finally. "It was the wrong approach, based on desperation and addiction-fueled thinking. But the underlying instinct was right. Juniper needed her father, and maybe you needed her too." The simple assessment captured what Ezra had been slowly recognizing over the months, that in trying to save Juniper from her mother's addiction, he had inadvertently saved himself from the prison of his isolation. "Good night, Ezra," Cordelia said. "Good night," he replied. In his room, Ezra stood at the window, looking out at the stars visible even through the light pollution of the small town. The constellations were the same ones he had observed from his cabin porch, yet his perspective had altered fundamentally. He was no longer merely an observer of life, isolated and apart. He had become a participant, with all the messiness and uncertainty that entailed.